At exactly 01:47 a.m. on May 18, 2026, every air defense radar in central and southern Ukraine simultaneously detonated into a cascading avalanche of threat signatures. Not dozens, not hundreds, but 524 Shahed series attack drones and 22 ballistic and cruise missiles, including 14 hypersonic-capable Iskander-M variants, punching through Ukrainian airspace in a coordinated multi-axis swarm that overwhelmed local intercept buffers across 14 oblasts in under 8 minutes, the single largest combined drone missile strike since Russia's full-scale invasion began on February 24, 2022. And yet, within 43 agonizing minutes, Ukraine's patchwork of NASAMS, Patriot PAC-3 interceptors, Gepard anti-aircraft systems, and an estimated 17 drone-hunting F-16AM Fighting Falcon sorties had clawed 503 of those drones and 4 of those missiles out of the sky, a 96.2% intercept rate that defies every standard model for saturation attack doctrine. And yet, it wasn't enough, because the 18 missiles and 16 drones that pierced that wall hit 34 separate coordinates in less than 4 minutes of impact sequencing, turning Odesa, Kherson, Dnipro, and multiple Naftogaz gas infrastructure nodes into synchronized kill zones of shattered glass and burning fuel lines, with residential towers in 2 Odessa districts collapsing their upper floors, a kindergarten in Kyiv region absorbing blast overpressure from a fragmenting Shahed, and at least 20 confirmed civilian casualties, including 2 children, while simultaneously, in a development that should have sent shockwaves through every diplomatic channel on the planet but was buried beneath the body count, one of those 524 drones on its terminal glide path didn't hit Ukraine at all. It struck the KSL Daeong, a Marshall Islands-flagged Chinese-owned bulk carrier anchored near Odessa, crewed entirely by Chinese nationals, a vessel that had absolutely no business being inside an active strike corridor at 0200 hours, and whose destruction now hands Beijing a live diplomatic grenade to either pocket quietly or detonate at the exact moment it suits Xi Jinping's calculus, because Putin is currently wheels up to Beijing for a state visit, and striking a Chinese ship, even accidentally, while flying to China is not an accident Moscow can easily absorb. Which means either Russian drone targeting data is now so degraded by 4 years of attrition and component shortages that its autonomous terminal guidance can no longer differentiate a Ukrainian grain depot from a Chinese-flagged cargo hull, or, and this is the scenario Ukrainian military intelligence's HUR directorate is wargaming right now, the Shahed that hit that ship was already spoofed by Ukrainian electronic warfare systems, its GPS receiver hijacked mid-flight by a Ukrainian-operated jamming platform operating from a naval vessel in the Black Sea, its navigation solution poisoned, and its impact point walked 3.4 kilometers off-axis until it buried itself in a Chinese hull instead of a Ukrainian port facility, a capability that Ukraine has been quietly refining since 2024, using a combination of reverse-engineered Russian EW doctrine and NATO-supplied software-defined radio platforms. And while Moscow scrambles to contain that crisis, the Ukrainian General Staff has already counterpunched, not at the front line, not at the obvious targets, but 1,500 kilometers deep, all the way to Orenburg in Russia's southwest, where President Zelensky confirmed Ukrainian drones struck gas processing infrastructure tied to the Orenburg gas field, one of the world's largest, a facility that feeds 10% of Russia's current oil refining capacity, a capacity already down 10% for 2026, according to Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service, meaning Ukraine's long-range strike campaign is now operating not as a tactical exchange, but as a systematic industrial dismantling operation targeting the very energy substrate that funds Russia's $250 billion wartime budget. And to underscore the psychological dimension of this strategic depth, Ukraine also launched a massive drone swarm directly at Moscow overnight on May 16-17th, not as a military mission with defined target sets, but as a political message.
Fireball footage from multiple Moscow Oblast districts shared live on Russian Telegram channels before the FSB could suppress it shattered the Kremlin's domestic narrative that the war was something happening to Ukrainians, not to Russians, and Zelensky called it completely fair response, a phrase that carried the quiet menace of a man who has long since stopped asking permission. Yet, here is where the strategic picture becomes genuinely unnerving, because running in parallel to the Ukraine-Russia kill chain, 3,200 kilometers to the southeast, the one-year anniversary of Operation Sindoor is being commemorated simultaneously in New Delhi and Rawalpindi, both nations insisting they won the four-day aerial war of May 6 to 10, 2025, a conflict that saw India's BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles strike 6 Pakistani targets, including air bases at Muridpay and Sialkot. Pakistan's J-10 fighters, the Chinese-supplied PLAF export variant, shoot down a confirmed minimum of 5 Indian aircraft, including 3 Rafale F-3R jets, and both nuclear powers come to within minutes of escalation thresholds that senior U.S. officials were running classified escalation ladders at 3 a.m. And what is happening right now, 1 year on, is not de-escalation, it is rearmament at speed. Pakistan's Army Rocket Force Command, officially stood up since the ceasefire, conducted a training launch of the Fatah-2 supersonic ballistic missile on April 28, 2026, with a 400-kilometer range that puts every major Indian military installation in Punjab within a 6-minute flight time, while Pakistan's Suparko Space Agency has placed 6 military reconnaissance satellites in orbit since May 2024, including a synthetic aperture radar platform capable of imaging through cloud cover and darkness, and a $406 million contract with China's PAC-3 will add a 20-satellite interferometric SAR constellation specifically designed for persistent change detection along the India-Pakistan border. In plain language, Pakistan is building a kill chain, satellites to find, Fatah missiles to fight.
Hit drone factories producing Shaheed-style loitering munitions to saturate, and a Chinese-supplied HQ-19 ballistic missile defense system on order to intercept India's retaliatory BrahMos salvos. While across the border, India's Army Chief, General Upendra Dwivedi, has publicly stated his forces will not show any restraint this time. The Indian Air Force Chief has claimed, without evidence accepted by outside analysts, that India downed 5 Pakistani jets during the 2025 conflict. And the Indian Defense Minister delivered a nationally televised address whose underlying message to Rawalpindi was unmistakable: "We are coming back, and we will be ready." And the truly terrifying element binding all of this together is not the hardware on either side, but the nuclear threshold calculation, because India's post-Sindoor strategic doctrine now explicitly treats any major cross-border attack as an act of war, requiring a conventional military response calibrated to remain below nuclear escalation, a doctrine the International Crisis Group has characterized as calling Islamabad's bluff over nuclear blackmail, which sounds analytically neat until you realize that Pakistan's ISPR issued a formal public statement warning that a future conflict could lead to cataclysmic devastation, and that Pakistan shall not hold back and will shatter the myth of geographic immunity, hitting the farthest reaches of Indian territory. Language that no responsible nuclear power publishes in an official press release unless it is either bluffing at maximum volume or has made a doctrinal decision that limited nuclear use is survivable. And threading all of these conflicts together in the background is the Iran war that began February 28, 2026, when the U.S. and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iranian nuclear and military infrastructure.
a conflict still burning in the Strait of Hormuz, whose management consumed an April 8th ceasefire brokered by none other than Pakistan's General Asim Munir, now elevated to Chief of Defense Forces, a man who flew to Tehran as the first regional military leader to do so since the war began, who sat across from Iranian revolutionary commanders and U.S. back-channel envoys simultaneously, who extracted a ceasefire framework while simultaneously commanding the most militarized nation-state in South Asia, who was invited to the White House for a private lunch with Trump, the first time a U.S. president privately hosted a Pakistani military chief without civilian leadership present, and who now holds more consequential cards in the global security architecture than almost any other single military figure alive, which means that the world you are looking at this week, May 18, 2026, is not a collection of separate regional fires, but a single interconnected system of escalation dynamics in which a drone that hits a Chinese ship near Odesa echoes in a meeting room in Beijing, where Putin is simultaneously trying to negotiate Chinese economic support for his war economy, in which the Fateh-2 test launch in Pakistan echoes in New Delhi, where India is selecting its next strike package, in which Ukrainian long-range drones over Orenburg echo in Moscow, where Russia must decide how much deeper it can reach without triggering a NATO Article 5 response. And what you should understand, what no headline will tell you this morning, is that the intercept rate, the kill chains, the satellite constellations, the spoofed drones, and the struck Chinese ship are not separate data points. They are the architecture of a world in which the next 4 days could look radically different from the last 4. And the only question that actually matters right now is whether the command authorities in Moscow, Rawalpindi, New Delhi, and Tehran understand that they are all simultaneously one miscalculation away from something none of their war plans were written to survive. So tell me, in the comments below, which of these 3 flashpoints do you believe will go kinetic first?